At 76, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, stands not at the edge of another concert stage, but at the edge of mortality. The world sees a frail man battling Parkinson's, relying on canes to walk, his voice no longer the thunderous cry that once defined a genre. But behind the tremor, there is fire. Behind the silence, a scream still echoes, because this isn't just the story of a rock star. This is the raw, unfiltered, almost impossible story of a survivor. Before the chaos, before the fame, before the music that shook generations, there was only silence. Born John Michael Osbourne in 1948 in the gray industrial slums of Aston, Birmingham, young Ozzy grew up in a cramped home with 6 kids and 2 exhausted parents. His father, hardened by the factory, believed emotions were weakness. His mother, worn down by the assembly line, had no room for tenderness. At school, Ozzy wasn't the smart one or the funny one. He was the forgotten one. Dyslexia made reading a torment. Teachers dismissed him as dumb. Classmates targeted him. The bullying was brutal: fists, kicks, bloodied noses. And at home, when he cried, he was beaten again. Pain didn't get you sympathy, Ozzy later said. It got you punished. By age 14, the silence and suffering became too much. In a dim bedroom, using his mother's clothesline, he prepared to end it. But fate and his father's rage interrupted. Not with compassion, but another beating. Something broke inside Ozzy that night. Or maybe it hardened. He stopped trying, stopped caring, stopped dreaming. 15, he left school. No direction, no skills. He drifted from job to job, slaughterhouse worker, horn tuner, construction help, but was too distracted, too damaged, too angry. Eventually, desperation turned to crime. A failed robbery in 1965 landed him in Winston Green Prison. There, among real criminals, Ozzy realized just how far he'd fallen. The cell was cold, the nights were long, and the silence deafening. One evening, that silence was broken, not by a scream or a fight, but by music. Through the static of a cheap prison radio came the infectious harmonies of the Beatles' "She Loves You." It was as if the concrete walls cracked open and light spilled in. Ozzy sat frozen, staring at the speaker, as the melody wrapped around him like a lifeline. It was like God spoke to me through music, he recalled years later, his voice choked with emotion. I didn't know how to play anything, but I knew in that moment I had to be on stage. I had to scream louder than the pain inside me. It wasn't just the song. It was the possibility that music could say what words never could, that it could reach into a shattered soul and stitch something back together. That one moment turned a broken, forgotten boy into a dreamer. And in a place meant to strip people of hope, Ozzy discovered his first spark of purpose. From that day on, music became his obsession. He didn't need training. He didn't care about polish. He only wanted to make noise, loud, unrelenting, primal noise, because silence had been his tormentor for too long, and now he had a weapon against it. He began scribbling band names on scraps of paper, whispering lyrics to himself in the dark. He imagined standing in front of a crowd, not to be cheered, but to finally be heard. The iron bars no longer felt like a sentence. They became a forge. That song didn't just change his mood, changed his destiny. Inside that grim prison cell, a dream was born. And decades later, that same boy would become the voice for millions of other misfits who needed to scream too. In 1968, a modest ad for a singer led Ozzy to 3 equally haunted souls: Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. Together, they formed a band, first named Earth, then rebranded after a horror film, Black Sabbath. If people pay to be scared, Ozzy said, why not give them music that terrifies them? On Friday the 13th, 1970, they released their debut album. Critics called it satanic, repulsive, but the kids, the angry, the outcast, the broken, they heard something else. They heard themselves. That same year, their accidental masterpiece Paranoid dropped. Songs like War Pigs, Iron Man, and the chilling title track became a soundtrack for a generation choking on silence. Ozzy's voice, raw and untrained, carried agony like a weapon. He wasn't singing. He was bleeding. By the mid-1970s, Black Sabbath ruled the world, but Ozzy was crumbling. Fame numbed him. The demons of his childhood returned, louder than the applause. Missed rehearsals, substance spirals. And then, in 1979, came the final betrayal. They fired him, not face to face, not with dignity. They sent someone else, cold, clinical, to deliver the blow. No farewell, no thank you, no chance to plead his case. Just exile. That was my band, Ozzy would later whisper, eyes wet with betrayal. They didn't even have the balls to tell me. For nearly a decade, they had been brothers, wielding darkness like a sword, creating a sound no one had dared before. Together, they didn't just start a band, they built a genre. And now he was disposable. With his world shattered, Ozzy vanished into a hotel room in Los Angeles. The curtains stayed closed, so did his heart. He drank to erase the pain, to numb the humiliation, to kill the scream clawing at his chest. The minibar became his medicine cabinet. Days blurred into nights. He spoke to no one. He barely moved. I just wanted it to stop, he admitted. I didn't care if I never woke up again. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was punishing. For Ozzy, who had used music to escape the noise of trauma, there was now nothing. No stage, no band, no reason. He was a ghost with a pulse, and even that seemed temporary. Friends avoided him. Some were afraid. Others were just tired. He was no longer Ozzy the icon, he was Ozzy the liability. Even the record industry turned its back, writing him off as another washed-up addict. But legends don't vanish. They transform. And just when the void threatened to swallow him whole, a hand reached in. Sharon Osbourne, the daughter of Black Sabbath's manager. She saw through the filth, through the decay, through the hollowed-out husk. You were the magic, she told him. You don't need them. You're not done. Ozzy didn't believe her, not at first, but her conviction was louder than his despair. Slowly, she pulled him from the wreckage, got him clean, got him focused, got him dreaming again. It wasn't a comeback, it was resurrection. Because sometimes, when the world buries you, the only way out is to rise louder than ever before. Enter Sharon Osbourne, the daughter of Sabbath's former manager. She didn't see a broken addict. She saw the soul of the band. You were the magic, she told him. You don't need them. Then came Randy Rhoads, young, brilliant, precise. His guitar didn't just play. It soared. It wept. Together, they created Blizzard of Oz in 1980. Tracks like Crazy Train weren't just hits, they were resurrection songs. I'm still here, they screamed. I still matter. In 1981, Diary of a Madman solidified their bond. Randy wasn't just a bandmate. He was Ozzy's brother, his lifeline. He saved me, Ozzy said. He made me believe in something again. But storms never last. March 19, 1982, Florida. Randy boarded a small plane for a joyride. Ozzy stood below, smiling faintly. On the third pass, the plane clipped the tour bus. It spiraled, crashed, and exploded in flames. Randy was 25. Ozzy ran toward the fire, screaming until his voice cracked. He collapsed beside the wreckage, unable to comprehend what he saw. I lost a part of my soul that day, he later said. It wasn't just Randy's body in that fire. It was my hope, my music. He disappeared into grief, weeks of silence, alcohol, numbness. Even Sharon couldn't reach him. But from that devastation, Ozzy wrote again. Not to move on, but to remember. But grief doesn't follow logic. The years after Randy's death weren't healing. They were descent. Through the late 80s, Ozzy spiraled. Each tour a battlefield. Each night a storm of pills, booze, and self-destruction. Then, in 1989, the unthinkable. In a blackout haze, Ozzy nearly killed Sharon. I don't remember it, he confessed. But when they told me what I did, I wanted to die. He was arrested, sent to rehab not for scandal but salvation. Sharon didn't leave. I saw a broken man, Sharon said, her voice trembling. But I also saw the man I married. She didn't see a monster. She saw a wounded soul, buried under years of trauma, addiction, and self-destruction. And that unwavering belief in who Ozzy could be, not just who he had become, was the anchor he didn't know he needed. Inside the rehab center, Ozzy wasn't a rock god. He wasn't even Ozzy. He was John, a man stripped of fame, eyeliner, and microphones. left alone with the voices he had drowned out for decades. There were no encores, no distractions, just silence and the mirror. And in that silence, the real war began. Detox wasn't just about getting clean. It was excruciating. Withdrawal clawed at him physically. But the emotional reckoning? That was worse. He faced the shame of what he had done, the people he had hurt, the years wasted. He cried in group therapy. He confessed things he never thought he'd say out loud. For the first time in his adult life, he felt the full weight of being alive. When he finally emerged, months later, he wasn't the same man. He was thinner, quieter, scarred in ways the public couldn't see. But for the first time in years, he was present. And with presence came purpose. In 1991, that purpose manifested in the form of No More Tears. It wasn't just an album. It was Ozzy's reintroduction to the world, not as a madman, but as a man. Songs like Mama, I'm Coming Home weren't just ballads. They were apologies. To Sharon, to his children, to himself. Road to Nowhere was a confession. Time After Time was a lament. And No More Tears, the title track, was a roaring declaration. I survived. This was the sound of me trying to be human again, Ozzy later said. I wasn't hiding behind anything anymore. The world responded with thunderous applause, not just because the music rocked, but because the man behind it was still standing, still fighting, still Ozzy. The world embraced his return. Every show a miracle, every sober day a victory. Sharon was no longer a rescuer, but a partner. They toured, laughed, fought, loved, and survived, but pain never left. In 2003, another catastrophe. Riding a quad bike on his estate, Ozzy crashed. His collarbone shattered, 8 ribs broken, his spine crushed. He stopped breathing. He spent 8 days in a coma. Sharon prepared to say goodbye, but Ozzy woke up. Doctors said recovery could take years, but like before, Ozzy fought. Through pain, therapy, surgeries, he fought. Months later, he walked on stage at the Brit Awards, a resurrection. But behind the scenes, chronic pain haunted him. Some mornings, he could barely move. But I'm still breathing, he said. And as long as I am, I'll keep going. Then came 2019, a simple fall. But for Ozzy, it was devastation. Metal rods from the 2003 accident were dislodged. Pain exploded through his body. Soon after, the diagnosis, Parkinson's disease. His body betrayed him again. His hands trembled. His legs gave out. I can't walk properly anymore, he admitted. But he didn't hide. Even as Parkinson's tightened its grip, as his legs gave out and his voice wavered, Ozzy did what he had always done. He fought. In 2020, he released Ordinary Man, an album steeped in reflection and finality. It wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a message from a man staring down time itself. The album echoed with raw vulnerability and quiet rage. Collaborations with artists like Elton John and Post Malone bridged generations, proving Ozzy was still a force, still relevant, still fearless. I'm not ready to hang up my mic yet, he said with a crooked smile. But by 2023, the weight of decades finally caught up. Years of injuries, surgeries, and the unrelenting march of Parkinson's made touring impossible. With trembling hands and tears in his eyes, Ozzy canceled his final tour dates. Fans mourned not just the shows but the end of an era. It felt like a curtain falling on heavy metal's most enduring voice. And then came the miracle. On July 5th, 2025, Ozzy returned to where it all began, Birmingham. Joined by the original members of Black Sabbath, he announced one last show, Back to the Beginning. It wasn't just a concert, it was a pilgrimage. A spiritual homecoming for the man who had once been a hopeless boy in Aston's gray streets. 40,000 fans packed the arena. Over 5.8 million watched from screens across the world. When Ozzy stepped onto the stage, escorted by Sharon and his son Jack, the crowd fell into hushed awe. He looked fragile, bent, but in his eyes still fire. He sang with every ounce of what remained. His voice cracked, his knees shook, but the soul never faltered. Songs like Paranoid and Iron Man became more than music. They became farewells carved in thunder. This is it, he whispered to the crowd. And everyone knew. Every dollar earned, over $190 million, was donated to causes dear to him. Parkinson's research, children's hospitals, and rescue shelters. It wasn't just a performance. It was a legend writing his own final chapter, with dignity, with love, and with the same defiance that defined him for over half a century. Ozzy took the stage, trembling, supported by Sharon and his son. His voice cracked, his body shook, but his soul blazed. "This is it," he whispered, and the world understood. $190 million in proceeds went to charities, Parkinson's research, children's hospitals, animal rescues. The final gift. Today, Ozzy Osbourne lives not as a rock god, but as a grandfather, a husband, a man. He spends time with his grandchildren, telling them wild tales. He records stories with Sharon on their podcast. He reflects on life, death, and everything in between. His fortune, now over $220 million, is not just for his family. His will, finalized in 2024, directs much of it to rehab programs, scholarships, and music therapy for the broken kids, just like he once was. "I owe my life to the people who didn't give up on me," he said. "So now I won't give up on them." From a bullied boy in Birmingham to the architect of heavy metal. From prison cells to platinum records. From bat-biting chaos to teary-eyed redemption. Ozzy Osbourne didn't just live a life, he survived one. And as his voice slowly fades, one truth remains. Legends don't die. They echo forever.